Hello and welcome to Ewe Sew You. My name is Zoe and this is my channel all about the crafty bits and pieces I get up to. I knit, I sew, I spin on a drop spindle, I dabble in weaving from time to time, and anything else that takes my crafty fancy. But today we're doing some plying and finding out if I've managed to spin a DK weight on my spindle. So grab a brew, put your feet up and let's get started. Welcome back to any returning viewers, and to any new viewers, a very warm welcome to you. As I mentioned in the opening to this video, we're doing some plying today. Regular viewers will know that ages ago I did a part 1 video trying to find out if I could spin a DK weight yarn on a drop spindle. I was using my Turkish spindle and I was using some John Arbon Harvest Hues in the Juniper colourway. And I wanted to get my first skein spun up so that I could work out how much more fibre to order. So I have now got 3 turtles off my Turkish spindle. I don't think I split the fibre up particularly evenly, so I've got one that's much bigger than the others. But these are now ready to be spun up into a plied yarn. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually to wind them into a plying ball. Now, all a plying ball is a way of getting the plies to sort of sit alongside each other as you're plying. I don't have a lazy Kate, and I find spinning from the turtles when I'm plying, I can get myself in a bit of a tangle. So a plying ball avoids that tangle. So just like if you were hand winding a ball of yarn to knit from rather than using a ball binder to get a cake, that's essentially what I'm going to do. I'm just going to hold all 3 plies together as I do it. And my top tip for that is a coin. If you struggle to get the centre of your ball neat when you start off, take a coin and hold the plies alongside it, or the yarn alongside it, and wrap the coin first. That way you'll have a nice, good foundation for your ball. So I'm going to get this wound up into a plying ball, and I'll come back when that's done and show you how I get it plied. Okay, so I have my essential supplies for plying my yarn up. I have my preferred spindle for plying with. I have my gauge that I use to measure wraps per inch. It's see-through, it's a little tricky to see on camera. This will tell me roughly what weight of yarn I've ended up with. So that's important. And now for 33rd Street Knits, if you've not seen Teresa over at 33rd Street Knits podcast, I have my tea. Essential British podcaster supply, apparently. So that's that. And I also have my plying ball. So this is the 3 plies next to each other, wound up into a ball. As I showed you when I filmed before, and the last little snippet, I hadn't perfectly split it up into 3 even sections, so I do have some single left over. I'm going to keep this to one side because I have another 100 grams of the same fibre to spin up, so I'm going to keep that to one side. Then if that fibre is also unevenly split up, I can use this as a 3rd ply. And also, once I've worked out the weight of this yarn once it's plied, I will be looking to get some more fibre to make up a project's worth. Okay, so plying is really quite simple. I've got my 3 plies all held together. You're also going to want to make sure they're coming in at roughly the same rate so that it's even. I've actually knotted mine together at the end. That's not an essential. That's just because I finished it yesterday and I didn't want the plies to come apart overnight. If you're plying straight away, it's not going to be too much of an issue, but the knot can be quite useful. You can put your hook in against the knot to start you off, which is what I'm going to do now. So either you're going to hook the singles over your spindle and hold them double like normal, or if you've tied a knot, you can actually put the hook between the singles. Obviously it's blunt, so it doesn't necessarily want to go. And go from there. So I'm holding my plying ball up high for now. I will probably later on put it in a box, because that's an option as well. If you put it on your fibre hand side, it's not going to get in the way at all. At the moment the table's on my spindle side, so it'd be a bit, I'd get discoordinated doing it that way. If it works for you, it's fine. But I'm going to hold it up above so I've got the tension in my singles, and when we ply anti-clockwise. So I'm going to spin my spindle anti-clockwise and just gradually let out more of the singles from the plying ball whilst my spindle is still spinning. When I either get more length than I want to have out, or as much length as I can manage, or the spindle runs out of spin, then I'll take hold of it, I'll butterfly down my plied yarn, and I'll take it off the hook. Then I'm going to wind it onto my spindle as a cup. So I'm just going to hold that first end against the shaft and rotate the shaft, keeping that in place until the yarn itself is holding it there. I'm just going to push it up underneath my whirl. Continue to wind the shaft to let that plied yarn reach the shaft. And then we lift it up onto the hook and we go again. We've spun the singles clockwise, so we have to spin the ply anti-clockwise. So this is going to take a little while. Always takes me longer than I expect to ply yarn. So I'll come back to you once I have a skein of yarn ready to measure the length and the weight. And we'll see if I've managed to get a DK. Be interested to see how close to it I am. At the moment I'm not 100% sure if I have or not, but we'll see. Okay, so I've now got my John Arbor fibre all plied up, and it's time to wind it onto my niddy noddy so I can measure the yardage and check the weight of the yarn. I mean, I can check it from here, but I want to check the yardage as well, so I'm going to do that and come back to you with some figures. So here it is, all wound up onto the niddy noddy. Now, as you can see, I've already tied it off. I've also already counted the number of wraps because no one wants to see me count that. My niddy noddy is 1.5 metres, so the whole length of one wrap is 1.5 metres, and I had 116 wraps, so that gives me approximately 174 metres. I say approximately because these things, the yarn is under tension on the niddy noddy slightly, and also I haven't set the twist yet, so it may fluctuate slightly, but we're in the region of 174 metres. I'll try and remember to put on the screen what that is in yardage. Excuse me, I've just got a bit of hair in my face, it's really irritating. Okay, so let's have a look at the wraps per inch. Now, my Ashford wrap per inch device comes with a little gauge suggestion on it of what wraps per inch is what, and they say that double knitting is an 11 wrap per inch. When I've looked online, the measurement I've come across on nitty.com was 13 wraps per inch, so I'm looking for somewhere between 11 and 13 wraps per inch. So I'm going to take my clear gauge. The reason I prefer using this one is because with the Ashford one I actually have to wrap it around, and again, tension can make a difference, whereas this one I can actually lay it across the white lines and see what the wraps per inch is. So I'm going to measure it in a few different places because being hand spun, it's not all going to be perfectly consistent. Now this bit's quite thin, so that's coming out at 22. That would put it in a very thin category. That's bordering it onto the lace, fingering to lace. This section we're looking at 16, so that's more of a fingering. I don't think I've quite managed it. It might puff up when I that was 14, that's not too far off. Might puff up when I set the twist. We'll see. Yeah, 14, so that's just over, so I'm going to a few places with 14. Okay, 14. So I'm coming out at 14 wraps per inch, which is slightly over DK, which means it's slightly thinner than DK. Ashford says 14 is a fingering. I'd say it's quite a heavy fingering looking at it, because it looks certainly closer to DK than fingering. So obviously the next step is to set the twist and see if that changes when I soak it, because sometimes the fibres puff up a little bit and you get a slightly heavier weight yarn. So I will soak it, hang it to dry and remeasure the weight at that point. It's looking like some sections are going to be fingering weight, some sections might be closer to DK. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with inconsistencies in a hand spun. That's part of the joy of it for me. yeah, so I'll go and take that away and get the twist set. So to do that, first of all, I'm going to have to take it off the niddy noddy. So I'll hank it up now and weigh it and see how we're doing yardage wise for that. I mean, 174 is not far off a DK length for 100 grams. But obviously there was some leftover singles, so it might be quite 100 grams, so I'll weigh it. And then, yeah, once it's set, I'll come back and remeasure the weight. So I've just loosely hanked it up there for now, because obviously when I soak it, I'm going to unhank it anyway. And my scales. Okay, so I had a little bit of an argument with my scales. They weren't measuring accurately. They tried to tell me that this was 50 grams. It's the size of my head. There's no way that's 50 grams. And also, I started off with 100 grams of fibre, so I know I haven't wasted 50 grams. I've got some ply left over, but it's not 50 grams worth. So there's a couple of things you can do if your scales are playing up like that. First of all, get a coin. You can look up online the standard weights of all the coins in your country, and you can use that to then check that your scales are weighing accurately. I would say use something like a bag of flour, but if you started using your flour, the weight's not going to be accurate. The next thing to do is to get a large bowl. I normally use a 3-pint pudding basin to weigh my yarn, and that's normally fine. But you actually want to make sure that your bowl is big enough to contain all of the yarn, all of the fibre, into its base, so that the weight is all going down onto the plate of the scales, and it just wasn't working in my usual bowl for this particular skein. So large bowl. I'd use a larger bowl for bats as well, because they take up more room. That way you're going to get a more accurate result. That worked for me, but if it hadn't, I would have been looking at the battery and seeing if that needed changing. So I've come out with 94 grams. So 94 grams at 174 metres, I know that's going to be within the DK range of yardage. You're looking at 190.3 yards there, and it's a bit hard to find consistent average yardages online for different weights of yarn, but there were 2 places I found that had charts in yards. There's Laughing Hens and there was Place Marker. They are different measurements that they give. They're both in yards, but they're different lengths. So Laughing Hens reckons 210 to 250 yards. So I'm just under that, but I'm also just under 100 grams of weight, so that makes sense. And Place Marker says 190 yards to 300 yards, so I'm just sneaking in there. So looking at the yarn, looking at the wraps per inch, looking at the yardage per 100 grams, I think on average this is probably going to be a heavy fingering to DK weight yarn. Once the twist has been set, it may puff up a bit, and actually with this blend of fibre and the way I've spun it, I would expect it to puff up a little bit, or to take it more firmly into that DK weight category. But I'm happy to say that for me this is close enough. I don't tend to get wonderfully accurate to the yarn. Like my fingering weights vary between lace and sport, but they average out at fingering weight, and I like that inconsistency as I knit up hand spun. So that works for me. I'm going to call this a DK weight, knowing how the fibre's likely to behave when it's soaked and everything. So yeah, I'm going to call that one a success. So I hope you found that useful and interesting. If you've enjoyed spending time in my company, like and subscribe down below and ding that bell for notifications for when I next upload videos. I aim to put a video up every weekend. Once a month is a roundup of the things I've been working on, and in between times it's videos a bit more like this when I'm delving into a project or a technique or a particular type of craft and showing you how I do things. So yeah, look forward to seeing you in the next video, but until then, happy crafting and bye-bye for now.